Welcome to another Critical EDH video. Critical H. Like a good neighbor, CDH is there.
I think you missed some letters there.
Sorry, it's just being in the presence of Cooler Jeff, our local Ithilid.
Illithid?
I don't know. It got around to octopus.
So what are we going over today?
Well, we are in Enchanted Grounds, where less than 24 hours ago, a 1K was wrapping up. Honestly, I think less than 12 hours ago. That top four round took forever.
Yeah, we went to Chili's, got triple dippers, came back. I was dropping off the boys at their cars and walked inside. They're still going. I'm just like, all right, I'm going home. I'm like, I'm not sticking around to watch this.
Yeah, me and my wife literally went to your place to watch a few episodes of Shoresy, and then when we were driving home, we could still see them playing through the windows.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that game took forever.
Yeah, I think they started at like 9 o'clock or something, and then the store closes at 12. So
yeah, I think it was a great example of how a lot of the games were going throughout the day. Typical tournament fashion. Every single round had at least like one or two pods where someone just stood up 3 or 4 minutes later because they landed at the Demonic Consultation, Thras' Oracle, really early. But there were multiple rounds that went 30, 40 minutes overtime.
Yeah.
And so it just makes sense that in the top four, instead of going 30 minutes overtime, you go 3 hours overtime.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the just the event itself and kind of the structure. So we've been running events, or at least I'm not running the event, but I kind of help advertise for the event and help advertise for the store. I have a good connection to like the local CDH community. I think you do too. And we kind of just advertise these events and say like, hey, this is a good place to play.
Yeah.
There's a nice like event coming up, and we're doing this monthly now. So this is kind of the one for February, and it was a $45 buy-in, 1K, and then like different tiers of pricing or prizing if like depending on attendance. So.
Yeah, and one of the fun things about playing at Enchanted Grounds is even if you don't make top 16, there's always a little something for everybody. I got a Goblin King. Last time I got a Lord of Atlantis.
Oh yeah, I got that too.
So filling out the binder for sure. But
and then they've got all this cool like product and stuff on the walls back here, and then games all throughout the store, and then there's a coffee shop attached. And
so that's the really nice thing is that I feel like one of the biggest tests of endurance in tournaments is when there's no lunch break. So the fact that you can get food in the store is a huge plus in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. We start like at lunchtime. We start kind of at 11 o'clock, or at least try to, and then rounds 1, 2, and like, okay, you're starting to get hit by the like the hunger bug right after round 2, and then you're like, oh, maybe I'll get like a panini or something from up front. But
we got burritos, anything you can want. Super grateful to have a store that so consistently is able to host the EDH events. And then also, just like you said, even though you aren't the TO, they're very responsive to you reaching out, or other community members asking for things.
They're really here to serve the CDH community and just Magic players in general. They've got a really good amount of product and even singles and stuff like that. But the owner is like an old head Magic player, so we won't talk too much about that. I did want to kind of introduce the event and say like, this is what we're attending. Normally they've been kind of around like that 30 player mark, and we're trying to get over that like 32 so we can be top deck silver points eligible. And this one was like 42 players.
Yeah, people came from all over. There was a Rook Thar player from Grand Junction.
That's what, 4 hours from here at least?
Yeah, so I think he came last night, found a place to stay in town, and I think it's really cool that not only is this a space that's able to house like locals, like we live super nearby, but also people are able to come from Granby or hours away to come play. So that's really, really great.
So I think that's the last we'll say about the event itself. We're going to look at the top 16. I think the next thing I do want to cover real quick is that the next event is March 22nd. So it's always the last Saturday of the month, and then they're points eligible. They do like 1K cash if there's enough attendance, and then some sort of like this time it was a tropical island for first, and then I think next time is a tundra. So
yeah, they're really good about scaling it up, and then we are more and more consistently hitting that silver status for the championship series. So even if you're full up on bronze points, it's still a great idea to show up and try to just get whatever points you need to get as high in the rankings as you can.
To dive a little bit deeper into tournament play than like just the weekly locals, and play for a little bit more serious stakes and a better. Not better crew, but like more people.
Yeah. At the very least, if we're talking about top 16, we're talking about some of the better players. So let's go ahead and jump in and see what we're looking at. because I think it was cut to top 13, but 14, 15, and 16 still got points.
Do want to recognize all those players. Great job. And if you look down and through the points, everyone's kind of that like 6 or 7 point level, which is means you've got at least one win under your belt and maybe 1 or 2 draws. So good job to all those players. But we're gonna since this tournament started and cut at top 13, that's where we're gonna look at, right?
Yeah.
So in 13th we've got Evan. What did Evan play?
Evan, what you got for us? Captain Lefty, Try Hard Queen. Looks like we got a Sisay. Yeah.
Let's fix that.
There.
Grid?
Yeah.
I think it's stacks, grid. I don't know. One of these. Sorry.
Here we go.
Sisay and
a lot of
like
planeswalkers.
Good planeswalker package. I don't know that I can accurately assess a Sisay list. Maybe this is a deck that I need to spend some time on, but
Chainer Adept is one that's not as normally seen.
I don't think Essica's pretty normal either.
That comes in and out. I think that would. I would love to hear any of the Sisay players in the comments jump in. I think that is kind of like an offer you can't refuse level of like common. It's kind of up to player preference. I know Eortha the Healing House is a common inclusion in Sisay, but not necessarily something that's required. So it's a good indication, especially if you're a Sisay player, and that they're probably running something that's kind of going to work well with that on tap, especially Marvin. Yeah. And then
Sakashima makes sense.
Super duper cool.
Yeah, I had to fight over. I don't think it was this Sisay player. Another Sisay player had a Sakashima, and I had to fight over my Bowmasters with theirs, and I kept mine alive, and then we kind of policed the board with both of them, and then I just went for it and killed theirs. And Sakashima is a really good clone here because then you have a legendary Bowmasters.
Dude, that's awesome. Cool. It seems like a great way to kind of get Sisay's power toughness up.
Yeah.
And then also, I know the Sisay can oftentimes struggle with finding meaningful ways to interact the board, especially in a Rhystic Study world. So having that extra card that's not only a combo piece but a utility piece is super good. Cool, Jeff, what do you think about this list? I completely agree.
Next, we've got Jay.
Let's go.
Our boy Jay. Man, I don't know if I can. I guess I have to change it every time. On Marneus.
Heck yeah. Ooh.
Marneus has been seeing a lot of play recently. I think we saw a bunch of it at the Fringe Festival where like a lot of the meta commanders were banned and all the partner commanders were banned. And that was a neat event where we got to sort of bring and showcase some decks that aren't really seeing a lot of play as much. But there were 3 Marneuses at that event, and then now we're seeing one here.
Obviously, he did well enough with it to make top 13, so congrats again to Jay. He was actually talking to me a little bit post-tournament yesterday, and he was saying that he's feeling really good about it, and he's pretty sure this is what he's going to be taking to Fishbowl.
Oh, nice.
So if there's any of our viewers who are going to Fishbowl and you're looking to tech against this deck, get ready to go against Charismatic Conqueror.
I think the big card that he wants us to mention, if I yell it loud enough, he'll hear us. He's in the store with us right now.
Yeah.
Is Fairy Artisans.
Fairy Artisans.
Oh, he's walking towards us
he's
now.
interested. Don't you wish you'd agreed to do it?
Here we are talking about his deck, and he's kind of wandering over here.
Yeah.
He's walking past.
This is so much more entertaining for me and Logan than it is for you guys. No, that is a super cool card. I
still don't know how to play around it.
I think it's a really difficult card to play around. I think it's a great example of a card that might not necessarily be just an auto-include for players, but Jay is traditionally a player that I think a lot of people consider as having super like airtight fundamentals.
Yeah.
And so being able to really work around a lot of the weird game states that it creates allows him to kind of put his opponents in an awkward like logic situation that allows him to propel his way at the very least into the top 13.
I mean, this is starting to look like a Glarb card to me, where I can use it as not a stacks piece, but kind of use it as like a way for me to accrue value sort of passively and just sit there and go, I can participate while not really doing a whole lot. In this case, you get to make recurring tokens with Marneus.
That's so good.
And so every time that a new creature enters, you make a copy of it, you delete the other token, and then you draw a card. So
that seems so cool.
That seems pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely I heard at least 2 or 3 times a player go, what? Judge! And I feel like at the very least, that's a nice tool to have in your back pocket, as it were.
So yeah, we're not going to dive too deep into these lists. I think we'll try to pick out a couple unique things about each deck. I think the like going over and deep diving every single deck is a little tired. I think that there's a lot of YouTubers that go out there and do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we're just trying to showcase like what is happening at our like local scene and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely think as a player myself, I'm not looking to like tech my decks against any like particular player, but more interested in just seeing what the overall kind of like vibe of the top 13 was, because something that we've talked a lot in the channel is how you have to build both for the Swiss Swamp, as Holden Pryor put it, but also when you're in rounds. And so just kind of seeing some ways that these decks were able to do both well is really, really valuable.
I'm going to start pulling up the next one because I know I got to change the view and stuff.
Let's go.
Let's do visual grid. We've got, this is the Tasigur player.
Yeah, this Tasigur player did a fantastic job. I went against him in Swiss.
Yeah.
He did an incredible job policing the board. It was a frustrating match for me because he had excellent decision making, which meant I couldn't get the target off my back at all.
So I've already got 2 Sultai decks under my belt now that I feel extremely comfortable with in Glarb and Thras Tivit. And I don't think that I can handle a third. Like, I just don't think I really need it. But if I had to choose a third, it would be Tasigur.
It performed really well. Another fun fact about this player is this was his first CDH tournament.
Yeah, I met this player and his friend, and I was like, hey, I don't recognize you guys, but like not in a bad way. I was like, let me introduce myself, and walked over, had a quick chat with them, and said, welcome, and it's good to see you guys. Hope you guys come to like another tournament. Hope you're having a good time, that sort of thing. Yeah. And he kind of dropped the bomb that he was playing Tasigur. I was like, oh shoot, I don't know how to play against that deck.
Me either.
I was lucky enough to not have to go against him during the Swiss, but I heard that he was doing some good work. So
yeah, he kept a cool head. He managed to land the end step right before his turn. He Court of Calling for a Hermit Druid, was able to activate it in his first main step, and Dread returns Thessa's Oracle back. And up until that time, he was playing like Table Police really, really well. So once again, congrats again on doing so well in Swiss, and for making his top 13. That's awesome.
I think decks like this are, just to kind of close out my thoughts on it, I think Tasigur is a commander where you can have that sort of like cuteness that we talk about, and sort of unique lines and properties where it's not just like a generic farm deck, but it also has the tools to rely on that strong Sultai shell.
Yeah.
So I think the deck is really cool, and I might end up trying it.
Yeah. Watch out, Glarb. No, I'm kidding.
Never cheating on you, bud.
Never cheat.
All right, so that was number 11, and we'll move on to number 10.
Congrats,
still with
Shane.
7 points, so that means he's 1, 1, and 2. And this is Rock
Thras. This is such a fast deck. Oh, man.
Fast and I think very consistent because it's just trying to generate mana, and you have the mana outlet in the command zone.
I think it's one of my favorite deck lists to look at, just because everything in here is just gas. It goes so fast. Oh yeah, that's true. It's the only bad card.
Yeah, no bad cards except for endurance, right?
I mean, you get to run Pinnacle Monk. Like, that's so awesome.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Pinnacle Monk lines, especially with Jessica's Will and doing sort of a pseudo loop between those two things. But then you involve the Dip Cat, as Jason likes to call it, or Displacer Kitten, and then you get to blink the Pinnacle Monk and retrieve the Jessica's Will from your yard and continue to cast it. It's
a super cool deck. I also really like to see, it looks like this player has included Wandering Archaic. I think talking about looking for cards that can serve multiple functions in a deck, just copying your opponent's spells, it can be very defensive. It makes it really hard for people to counter your stuff, as well as if people are just throwing around straight tutors. It just is generically good.
Yep, and this is such a Cradle deck that they're also on sowing Micah Spawn as another Cradle tutor, even if it's 4 mana.
Dude.
So
that's so good.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Jessica's Will we talked about. Green Suns, Eldritch, Neoform. I mean, seems like
this is such a
standard
fun-looking
list,
deck.
But I don't use standard in a negative way.
Oh, not at all.
This is a really strong deck. So congrats to this player. And
yeah, way to go, Shane.
I actually think, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to switch over to my other account, which is ad-free.
Good call.
And then we'll go back to, that was Alex, right?
That was Shane.
Shane, okay.
So next up is David.
Cool.
Let's see what you got,
David
David.
A. I think he's got Glarb.
Is he? Whoa!
Yep.
Heck yeah!
I think he's running a list very similar to mine. Right away, I'm seeing Band of Progress, but I'm also seeing the format of Teferi.
Oh, nice.
This Teferi is not the win con that like Jace is, so the one triple blue Jace. But I think this is a really good value piece in this deck.
I think I was really grateful for the opportunities to talk to him a few times between games. And something he communicated is that he was basically in every game consistently putting up win cons and really doing a good job of, even in the games that he was in that were forced to draws, he was a huge component of that because he
Component or proponent?
I guess he was one of those players who was like, I will force you to use your interaction by putting up more win cons, and if you stop me, the player after me will win, so we have to draw.
So he's a pusher.
Yeah. Which is an important thing for a deck to be able to do, and especially a Sultai shell. I think it can be easy to, because you have so many tutors to just kind of like wait and play passively. But at least from what I saw, it seemed like he was doing a really good job of picking his moments to play aggressive, and even situations he wasn't able to pull out a win, a draw is just as good.
I'm seeing quite a few differences between mine and his here. We're seeing Dosen, Gilded Drake, Orcish Bowmaster, Shieldred the Apocalypse.
Dude,
so it's
so
sort of a draw hate piece. As much as that card hates on draws, it also draws hate from your opponents, and I don't like it for that reason.
That's true. It's one of those cards that is impossible to keep on the board.
But he's also on Reverent Silence and Bane of Progress, so just like me, Toxic Deluge, even going deeper into the wipes. I'm now on Massacre. So
Whoa,
you know what
nice.
Massacre is?
Yeah. That's the kind of like black version of Reverent Silence, right?
It is. You can give everything -2/-2. If an opponent controls a planes and you cast it for free, but it's 3 and a black.
Okay.
So it doesn't hit Glarb, doesn't hit most of your stuff, and it's pretty efficient.
That's
so,
awesome.
Like that a lot. And then, kind of standard stuff. I'm not seeing Doomsday, so it's very similar in strategy to what I'm used to, and congrats to David.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great job on placing top 13.
All right. Oh, wrong tab. Here we
Next
go.
is
And
Luca. Let's go.
Luca is one of the owners of Fabled Events, and Fabled Events put on Snowy Summit 2 and soon to be Snowy Summit 3.
Yeah, and also just a fantastic player as well. One of the things I was talking to him a lot, you may be able to catch it in some of the interviews we did, is down in the artifact section, this list is running Weathered Runestone. And he has said that card in this list always is doing something.
Well, geez. Cursed Totem, Grafdigger's Cage, Weathered Runestone. Yep.
Yeah, especially Esper. I think maybe a little bit more than Sultai always wants the game to go on just a little bit longer, and Weathered Runestone does a really great job of locking out your opponents in a way that makes it really hard for just one player to get an advantage. Sometimes it can be a rough card to play if your opponents are playing really greedily, but I think if you're in a good pod and if you're a good player, Weathered Runestone telegraphs to the table that, like, we're in for the long haul.
So Tivit is a hard control deck, I think, and where Glarb is a bit of a soft control deck. So Glarb, I play permissively, and I'm able to let players play their game plan and then kind of win on top of that, or put the board in a state in which allows me to win. Tivit does not do that. Tivit must stop all aspects of the game and put the game in a state in which it wants. Yeah. So these cards like Weathered Runestone attack decks like Sisay and Kinnan at an angle in which it's very hard for them to deal with. Whereas I don't have the tools to do that in Glarb.
And I also think Luca as a player has enough experience, both in Tivit in general, but also in CDH, to really be able to capitalize on those moments of forcing your opponents into a bad position in a way that doesn't free one player up to win without any interaction, but instead, exactly like you said, controls the table in a very hard, solid way that allows them to win.
And it's got a solid counterspell suite, so if you try to remove these pieces, then it's going to react and go, no, you can't do that.
So, congrats again on making top 13. Looking forward to Snowy Summit 3.
Awesome work, Luca. Let's go back to
who's this guy?
I don't know. Playing a bad deck list.
Oh, there we go. Wrong side. Thief. X2.
Yeah, we've talked about this deck quite a few times. Decided to finally play it and actually put my money where my mouth is on the deck. And I didn't lose a game. This is the best thing I can say about it.
Yeah. both getting the chance to talk to you throughout the tournament and other players as well. I'd encourage you guys to check out some of the videos that we've put up of interviews from the tournament. Even when this deck isn't making win attempts, it is interacting with the board in a way that just you gotta take it on its own terms. People who are trying to ignore this Rogsai list, who are thinking, oh, I'm gonna go let them do whatever they want in their corner. I'm gonna try and win, and then boom, Aura Thief. Like,
I think one of the things that the deck does well and lends to my playstyle is playing politics. And if you've never seen a Rogsai play politics, it is very weird.
That's a really weird place to be.
Yeah, Grixis politics is not where I thought I'd end up, but it's kind of where I am right now. I'm not sure if I'm going to end up taking this to Snowy Summit, but the Double Thief, for example, I've got some good stories about Swiss with the Aura Thief. Round one, I put down an Aura Thief very early, and round one, I found an Aura Thief later in the game. There was a Kinnan that had an Astral Dragon with 2 Rhystic copies and a Mystic Remora.
Oof.
The person across from me had a Rhystic Study. I had 2 Rhystic Studies already. And so I dropped Aura Thief, and the Kinnan that had nothing goes, this is Jonah, by the way. Awesome dude.
Yeah, great player.
One of the MTG Basics guys, real
Super
stand-up
solid
guy.
player.
Yeah. He goes, Logan's not playing this unless he has some sort of like way to get rid of it immediately. We need to either counter this or we need to react appropriately afterwards, which is a very fair assessment.
Yeah, correct.
So I played it immediately, calling the week, sacked it. And so with the trigger on the stack, I'm standing to gain 3 Rhystic Studies and a Mystic Remora. So I would have 5 Rhystic Studies and a Mystic Remora. And that puts this deck in a state of, like, you just can't play the game or I just win.
Yeah.
And both of those kind of, like, benefit me. So anyway, Jonas says, well, I have a Chain of Vapor. I can at least remove our Rhystic Studies and then reset it so he doesn't really gain anything. So all of these players stone rain themselves with copying the chain or letting the chain, continue.
Yeah.
And all of the Rhystics went away. The trigger resolved, and I go, cool. I still have my 2 Rhystics, and then that was it. We ended up drawing that game, but I mean that just shows the power of the card and kind of the situations you can put your opponents in.
I think it's a really great example of traditionally Rogsai is a deck that is trying to just do its own thing in its own corner and go as fast as possible. But instead, you've been able to develop a list that's almost the inverted version of that, where if you have a player that's trying to just avoid the table and just speed run their way to a win, you are able to stop them in their tracks and take all the resources for yourself in a way that, exactly like you said, forces those weird situations where as a Grixis pilot, you are politically kind of like holding the table hostage in a way that either forces them to use interaction or slows things down.
I'm a big fan of that because what better way to make your opponents interact than with something that you like, I don't really care what you do here. Like, if you remove my Aura Thief, okay, maybe it dies. Like, you have to find specifically Deadly Relic, or you have to find a Chain of Vapor, or something like that. And the chances of that are low. And I just put the pressure on the table that, okay, well, now all the attention's shifted over there, and they can't really do anything about it, and they kind of have to play cautiously.
Yeah.
So I like those cards.
Yeah, it's able to. I think very similar to the way you've talked about Glarb, exert influence on the table in a very indirect way, but that you're able to influence as the pilot. Great job taking it to the top 13.
Thanks.
I look forward to hearing more about it.
And I was a little bit tongue-in-cheek in the not losing a game. I won a game, and then I drew my 3 other Swiss games. So I think something we do need to talk about eventually, whether it's in this video or another, is sort of the state of where tournament play is at and how hard it is to push through wins. And I think that's kind of a struggle that we're finding more and more as we play at higher and higher levels.
I'm really interested in just kind of seeing what our thoughts on it are after going to Fishbowl. Because it could be the Denver meta. But based off the discourse that I hear from the CDH community in general, I think it's something that we're all kind of feeling. And so I'm interested to see where it goes. Speaking of seeing where things go, Xur in 2025, let's go.
Yeah, I actually got a chance to play against this player. He's really good. I mean, he had double Ristic, and I'm sitting there staring at it going, okay, well, best thing I can offer at this moment is protecting somebody else's win or forcing a draw. And that's what we had to do in that game, because when Zur comes down and then it finds Ristic, and then it finds Ristic 2, and then if it's able to find Ristic 3, there's no getting through that wall.
Yeah, I actually lost this player in round 1. They did a super good job. Seat 1 was a T and K that they were able to kind of use to get the rest of the table, use a lot of interaction on them. And then on their own turn, they also used that kind of very traditional, like Zur getting Ristic study. So they were politicking with the table and used finding their own Ristic study as a way to feel out kind of what interaction the table had. And then they just Thassa's Oracle Tainted Pacted, and then got a super clean win. They did a really, really good job. I think it's a great example of how, very similar to Jay, the more solid your grasp on the fundamentals are, the deeper into the commander pool you can go to kind of complement your playstyle.
Looks like he is actually on the Necro and Phyrexian on life sort of plan, or Children of Horus plan as well. And I was pretty unsure about that sitting down in that pod, because at this, I don't think he was being deceitful, but he had said, like, well, when I swing with Zur, I'm not getting Necro. And I don't think he was alluding to, like, I'm not playing it, but in that situation, I think it made more sense for him to get Ristic. But I think having these options of, hey, I can do the Turbo, Necro, Phyrexian on life, and draw my entire library plan, or do Ristic, copy Ristic, that plan, and having both of those sort of lines or options is really, really powerful.
And then we can see he's not running this gigantic enchantment package. It's definitely larger than you might expect from the average Esper deck, but it seems like he's doing a good job of balancing what his commander does specifically well, along with just being in a great color wedge.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of these Esper decks and these monolithic Esper commanders where we see Tivit, we see Zur, we see Marneus Calgar, and you can play whatever Esper commander just kind of fits your style and probably do well with it, because the wedge or the that section of the color pie is really strong. It's
so strong right now.
Yeah.
Well, hey, congrats again on making the top 13. Great player. Hope to see you at many, many more EG tournaments.
Yep, absolutely. And next we've got
Kinnan. Let's go. This is our first Kinnan of the top 13. Based off the amount of Kinnans that were in the tournament. I mean, there was basically one in every pod. I think is a good indication that this player is among the Kinnan pilots, definitely one of the best that showed up today.
So we talked about Jonah earlier. This is actually Jonah's brother.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
dude,
so
I was wondering. Something about that beard, I was like,
yeah,
there's something there.
They were both in my top cut pod.
Okay.
And I'm just sitting there against two Kinnan killers, and I'm like, oh, man, like I feel like a little bit out of my depth.
Yeah.
You know?
Dude, it's got to be in the genes or something. Like, they're both really, really good pilots.
I think this is a deck in which you pick up and you just play. And you just play, and you put the time in, you put the sort of the reps, and you figure it out. Or maybe you don't, but I think it's one of those decks where I see players sit on it and they go, I'm a Kinnan pilot. Like, that's my thing.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a deck that rewards specialization.
Yeah.
I definitely, over the course of this tournament, playing Kinnan myself, gleaned a whole lot of appreciation for some of the Kinnan pilots out there, because I think I got the tiniest glimpse into how many calculations are going in their brain. And even if you're just flipping Kinnan, you're seeing so many cards on your deck, and if you're so many cards in your deck, and if you're paying attention, you know where all your counter spells are, you know where your lands are, and you know with greater and greater accuracy what's going to be in those next few flips.
I like that the decision tree with this deck is often a very personal one, and your opponents can't really do anything about. So it's kind of like, when do I flip Kinnan? When, what order do I play my rocks in? That sort of thing. And like, your opponents can't really exert influence over you in those situations. So while you have more control over it, you also kind of control when you punt or when you don't as well. And that's hard for a lot of people to get over. So I think the deck is really powerful, but you almost certainly have to put in the reps for it.
Absolutely, and it's a deck that tends to draw a lot of heat, which makes it very difficult for the deck to do really well accidentally. So congrats again to this player.
Awesome.
If we want to scroll through and see any, I know Armored Scrap Gorger is something a lot of people are cutting, but
hey,
it's
there's
super,
the Astral Dragon.
super good. Astral Dragon, incredible right now.
Sphinx.
Looks
not
like
really seeing anything too.
Thorn Mammoth.
Thorn Mammoth is kind of like a plus or minus in this deck.
Looks like they're kind of doing big flip
Oh,
stuff.
Walking Ballista.
Oh, whoa, interesting.
So this is almost like a more traditional style. Hey, I found another outlet. Kind of. I'm going to combo off and
that's
make
cool.
infinite mana. So that's kind of neat. That's also a way to almost win through One Ring Protection if you're not at time, because you can stack the counters on Walking Ballista and just pass the turn to the One Ring player, and then in their upkeep to kill them. But if you're at time, you can't do that. So that's kind of interesting.
I also wonder if this was a read on kind of like TNT, or expecting a lot of other Kinnans to be out. Kinnan doesn't have access to some of the best creature hate that we have right now, which is OBM. But I can see how if you're making a ton of mana, you can just throw a Walking Ballista out there, and it gives you the ability to get rid of a lot of those hate pieces that are really good against you, like Drannith Magistrate if you haven't gotten Kinnan out, or stuff like that.
Well, interesting. No power artifact. And only on Mirror Maid as a clone. So,
no copy enchantment.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, I think the next one is actually a Kinnan list as well. And there's Jonah. There's the other, the other Kinnan guy.
No. All right, let's see how different these lists look.
So we've got Clever Impersonator, no Astral Dragon.
Hydroelectric Specimen, that was a difference.
Okay. Yeah, I think Hydroelectric is a good one here.
I'm seeing less of like the big flips, kind of like Thorn Mammoth or
I think
Void Winnower.
the decks in Kinnan that are having more success are focusing more on the Ristic Copy or the sit and wait and the kind of the flash sort of thing. Kinnan kind of gives you that inherent flash, because if you're ripping Kinnan flips, you can do that at instant speed. So you don't really have to main phase these giant flips anymore. And even sometimes all of your flash enablers that are creatures are able to be flipped off of Kinnan.
Yeah, that is. I'm trying to remember who I heard say this. I think it was Steven, but I apologize if it was someone else. It may have been Gerald. This seems really similar to kind of like the no bad cards Kinnan list.
Yes.
That this is a list that rewards like a Kinnan's Kinnan, like someone who has been on the list for a long time and knows how to like milk every last bit of resources out of it.
A pessimist would say this is someone who's fully given up on the situation of the CEDH meta, but no, I think this is a really good meta call right now, just to be on these clones and Mirror Maid and Copy Enchantment and Copy Artifact. So
yeah, it is cool to see that both this and a more big flip style of Kinnan still absolutely have a place in the meta. So that's really, really cool to see them literally back to back in the rankings.
Yep. And we've got another Kinnan. Is that right?
Kinnan block.
our very own Jason Doan. Here.
Looks like we found him. We found where all the Kinnans were. I imagine this is going to be a very, very similar list to Jonah's.
It's actually one card different from Freedom Waffles, no bad cards, and he swapped Emrakul for Astral Dragon, and that was it. So here we're going to see the Astral Dragon, the Consecrated Sphinx, all the copies and stuff like that, but that's,
Dude, Astral Dragon is such a heavy hitter. Every time I was talking to Jason, he was talking about how he had 5 Arcane Signets or 3 Ristic Studies or anything like that. It's such a cool card, especially because sometimes when you see those gigantic cards like Nezahal in your hand as a Kinnan player, it can be kind of frustrating because you're hoping to flip into them. But Astral Dragon is a card that the later into the game it gets, the better. So even if you do end up drawing it, it still gives you that control. Because I'm sure any player who plays Copy Enchantment can confirm that as soon as you play it, the next turn there's going to be an even better enchantment that you wish you would have held on to it for. So yeah,
I think Astral Dragon of all the creatures in this list probably is the best one, aside from maybe Hullbreaker, that you, if it's in your hand, you're like, okay, how do I hard cast this? Versus flipping it. So I love the card. I think it's great. I don't know that any decks outside of Kinnan can realistically run it right now, because there's no Kinnan can make the mana for it. Other decks really can't.
Yeah, I think outside of Consecrated Sphinx, which we literally just shove into every deck at this point.
Well, it's 6. Sphinx is 6, and
so much easier to cast.
Astral Dragon is 8. 8 is too much.
Kinnan's able to get it out, I think, while it's still relevant to your game plan. So while you're still developing your board state, you're able to get this massive 8-mana creature out in a way that, maybe if you tried slotting it into blue farm, all you're going to do is stop your Adnaz dead in its tracks.
And I think that Astral Dragon is really an answer to punishing Smothering Tithe more than anything, because if you are up against a Tithe deck and they resolve a Tithe, you want nothing more than an Astral Dragon.
Oh yeah, it's so good. And not only does it propel your game plan, but it kind of, similar to what we were talking about with your Rogside list, forces your opponents to, of their own volition, slow their plan way down.
Yep.
I've never seen people skip so many of their own smothering Tithe triggers than after an Astral Dragon's resolved.
Yeah. All right. Well, congrats to Jason making. Sorry, that was our top 4, by the way. Jonah, Jason, Jacob, and Tyler. So let's look at Jacob's list. Jacob was he top in points?
He was the number 1 seed going into it, so he actually had a bye for the top 16.
Awesome.
He's on a blue farm list. Super great guy. Very humble about the fact that he had been playing incredibly well all day. He's on a very similar list to Jason's. I think he literally is card for card on Jason's Razor Cake list right now. He had a lot of good things to say about it over the course of the interview. One of the things he was communicating, something that I think we're hearing a lot from T&K pilots right now, is the importance of mulliganing really, really low. He said he was never above 5 cards in any single game.
Yeah.
Specifically just because this deck responds so well to looking for the specific advantage engine you want for that game, and then as long as you can get that right piece into play early, you are just locked for the rest of the game. Worst case scenario, it's a draw, at least for him.
Yeah, he was in my round 3 game in which we drew. Tyler was also in that game. He ended up winning this tournament, and it was Tyler, the Zer player, myself, and what's his name again? The first name? The T&K player.
Oh, Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob. I always get confused. Jordan, Jacob, Jason,
Josh.
I don't know, Josh. Yeah, whatever. Jacob. So those 4 players, which all kind of did really well in this tournament, and maybe I did okay, but he had gone down to like 4, I think, that game, and he found like Ancient Tomb, and he was just waiting for another land because he had Rhystic Wheel in his hand, and he was unable to find it. So he and I kind of worked together to push that table towards the draw, and a lot of people who don't play CEDH as much, or maybe are newer to the format or newer to the tournament scene, are just saying, well, why don't you just win the game? Why don't you just push for the win? Why are games going to draw so many times? It's because these decks have tools to push for draws in the case that you can't win. These cards are so flexible that you can go, well, hey, now I'm going to exert my influence on this card, whether I actually cast it or not. I can even just show the card and say, like, hey, I have this. Don't do this. And he and I were able to work together in forcing that draw, and ultimately that got him to top seed.
Yeah. I think it is so important in this meta to know when to push for a win, when to push for a draw. And sometimes, if you're on a deck like Rockstar 2K, you can push for a win in order to force a draw. I know it can be really frustrating. Like, for instance, in round 4, all but 1 pod ended in a draw.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure a lot of players will have different opinions about. But from my perspective, I think the more that pilots and the more the decks are able to present a wider range of options in tournaments, the more it's really able to bring out that skill, whether it be fundamentals, whether it be deck building, or whether it be politicking.
I won't dive into it too much, but I think a lot of the reasons that games are going to draws right now are the card quality in each deck is so high, and then if you combine that with the Rhystic Study, and if everyone has a Rhystic, now you have all of these flexible tools at your disposal. You can use it anytime in almost any situation, and even if you don't, maybe the person next to you does. And then if everyone has those tools, it's like, well, no one can get across the finish line. So that's why we're seeing more games go to the draw. That's why we're seeing more games go overtime. And we didn't even really talk about, like, round 1, we were, 40 minutes overtime? Something like that?
Right? I think Cool Jeff was there.
He was there.
Yeah, he confirmed 40 minutes overtime. It took forever.
Yeah. So I think, for better or worse, that's where we're at right now with the sort of meta and the tournament scene. But congrats to Jacob for doing really well in Swiss.
Yeah, really, really well in Swiss. And then based off of how long the game went, I can only assume they did really, really good in top 4 as well.
Yeah.
And then our winner is Arcum Dagsson.
I've lost to this deck. I can't tell you how many times. And at this point, I'm just super happy when I get to draw against it and not lose.
Yeah. Tyler is obviously a fantastic pilot of Arcum Dagsson. He was able to take down Snowy Summit 2 with it last year, but also getting the chance to talk with him as a player. I think he is a great example of someone who his style, his way of playing is just so genuine and authentically him.
Yeah.
He's not like pulling off these crazy bluffs where he's, lying, this way and that. Instead, he plays his
very
deck
straightforward about
pretty face up.
Yep.
And then he's a really great politicker, but not in the way that he's wheeling and dealing, but he's just communicating the board state. And he's looking at you in the eyes and he's like, don't you think Marneus Calgar with his Mothering Tithe is a bad problem? And I'm like, dang, that is a pretty bad problem.
Yeah, if you say the truth and you say it out loud, I think you'd be surprised at how much influence you can exert over a game by just sort of pointing out things that other players might be internalizing, but they might not realize how serious that is. So just pointing out those small things going, I had a situation in my top 13 where I was sitting across from the Thras player we mentioned earlier, and I said, hey, like, I'm a little low on interaction right now. We're sitting next to two Kinnans. Like, I would prefer at this point if you and I had sort of like work together to just kind of keep things in check. Not to say that there's any problems that we need to do anything about, but looking at the one Kinnan's player's hand, he had 10 in hand. The other one had an 8 in hand, and I'm like looking at 4 cards. He's looking at 3 cards. I'm like, before we do anything against each other here, we need to realize the reality of the situation. And I think that kind of puts things in perspective to a lot of people, and that even tells them that you're on the same page as them, and you're not trying to push over top of them or push underneath them and things like that.
Yeah, in a format that's so social, where it's always a 3v1, and no one ever knows if they're a part of the 3 or a part of the 1, finding those ways to effectively communicate that, at least for this moment in time, while this one spell's on the stack, I'm on your side, is a really, really important skill to have if you're looking to do well in tournaments.
Yeah, sometimes it's that fine line between opening your mouth and saying something that may be too obvious, or if you open your mouth at the wrong time and then it kind of reveals like information. That's things that you learn by playing the game and you playing at a higher level. So focus on those things as a newer player or someone that's having trouble getting across to top 16 or top 13. Look at those things and go, well, is it the deck or is it my skill? Maybe not. Maybe it's not either of those things. Maybe it's just like I need to open my mouth and say like, hold on, there's a problem and I see it. Yeah. And like no one's saying anything about it. Maybe people don't realize there's so many complex things going on.
Yeah, I think something that we've both talked about is one of the biggest learning experiences I had starting to play tournaments is I would see stuff happening on the board and I would assume that like everyone knew what was going on. So I wouldn't say things like, wow, we should counter Tainted Pact, because I was like, well, everyone knows, but there's so much going on all the time that just that commitment to making sure that the most important things are said out loud. Yeah, I think can't be understated.
Well, that was a big tangent from Tyler, but Tyler's really good at all of those things.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
why he converts regularly, especially on a deck that most would consider weird. And
I think even he considers it weird.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I'm gonna start calling it Blue Magda, just to kind of irritate him a little bit. But
I do think it's really interesting. He definitely deserved to win here. I think we've kind of been talking about trying to move from pet decks to decks that kind of can do a lot of the work for us because they're just naturally really good decks. I think this is a great example of I'm sure Tyler picked up this deck and was nowhere near being able to consistently take down tournaments like Snowy Summit 2. And talking to him the way he did it is just an insane amount of hours and practice and a willingness to learn both from the deck but from his opponents. So kudos. Sure. I know this is just one more step on his journey in being a CDH player, but always a pleasure to lose to him.
yeah, I will keep losing to him until I'm blue in the face and blue like this deck. So.
Yeah, someday I will remember how this deck works, but definitely not yesterday.
Yeah, that's right. All right, well, that's our sort of top 13 and coverage of that. I think overall it was a pretty great event. I think there's a lot of things to talk about here and a lot of things to analyze about sort of what pods we're drawing and how many draws there were, how many pods were going over time, what the play patterns were with the Ristics and the copies and that sort of thing. I think I'm going to have a lot of takeaways here, and then I definitely have my work cut out for me for the next week because we have a huge fucking event coming up.
Fishbowl's coming up.
Yeah, so we're at like 5 days till Fishbowl.
Holy cow. Dude, doomsday clock is ticking.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be an experience in all of itself, but I think playing how we played and playing the sort of style that we are, it's going to be pretty hard to go wrong.
Yeah, I'm definitely grateful for the opportunities like tournaments that let you reflect on your play style, get valuable information from your opponents, and can kind of mark where you're at in your journey as a player, so that even if we only have 24 hours before we have to start getting ready for the next tournament, we can look back at a snapshot in time and start to make adjustments so that hopefully we can do really well at the next big one.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's about it for us in our coverage for this tournament. There will be other videos of us putting out like interviews with players, and you get to meet some of the fantastic players in our local scene.
Yeah, they're rock stars.
They always have something interesting to say, and there's so many personalities there and great people. And I hope that if you're watching this and you're in this area, like, come see us. Come down to Enchanted Grounds Littleton. We play on like Wednesdays and Fridays, and sometimes we have tournaments on Saturdays, or we go up to level 7 North and play in the weeklies there.
And if you're watching this and are interested in picking up any of the decks that we showcased in the top 13, whether it was one of the 3 semi-identical Kinnans or anything like that, all of these pilots, I feel confident in that if you even commented on their Moxfield profile or reached out in the Colorado CDH Discord, they would love to kind of walk you through, at the very least, some of their deck banking decisions, or maybe reach out for a coaching session.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would probably, every time I go against Jonah, for example, I'm like, this dude knows something I don't.
I know.
And I look to all these players and go, what do they know that I don't, that like they can offer me? And so I'm always talking to them between rounds and stuff. So that is absolutely a great idea. All these deck lists are going to be posted in the description of this video. And I guess for last closing thoughts, join our Patreon, whether a free or $5 tier, and we've got some new and unreleased content there. And we're always going to have that sort of layer of, there's new stuff out there, there's going to be current stuff on YouTube, and then, that's about it.
Yeah, thank you guys for watching. I think there's been a really good reaction to a lot of the content we've been putting up. And if you guys keep liking it, we'll keep making it.
Absolutely, 100%.
Thank you guys for watching.
See ya.